The Time Traveler's Empire. Chapter 1, The Accident. The year was 2085, and Dr. Michael Reeve was on the verge of a groundbreaking discovery. A physicist and mathematician of unparalleled genius, Reeve had spent the last decade working tirelessly on his invention, a machine capable of bending time itself. The concept had once been dismissed as fantasy, but his revolutionary theory of temporal displacement had opened doors no one had thought possible. His goal? To witness history firsthand and perhaps alter its course for the better. The machine, a sleek, silver construct, was nestled in the heart of Reeve's laboratory. It hummed with power, its intricate circuits and quantum processors pulsing with the potential to rewrite the very fabric of time. In the final test, Reeve pushed the button to activate the machine, but something went wrong. The temporal field flickered, sparking uncontrollably, and before he could react, he was sucked into a vortex of swirling lights. When the world settled, Reeve found himself in a strange, unfamiliar place. The lab was gone. The sterile, high-tech environment of 2085 had vanished, replaced by a dusty, industrial landscape. It was 1925. The shock of time travel was overwhelming. His heart raced as he realized the magnitude of what had just happened. His body was intact, but his machine was destroyed, leaving him stranded in the past. With no way to return to the future, Reeve understood that he was now living in a time he could only read about in books. But he was no ordinary traveler, he had knowledge of the future. Chapter 2, The Birth of a New Empire. As days turned into weeks, Michael Reeve began to adapt to his new surroundings. The world of 1925 was vastly different from his own, but it was also filled with untapped potential. Reeve's first few months were spent in secrecy, studying the politics, the economy, and the technological limitations of the time. He understood that he couldn't just appear as a man from the future. To succeed, he had to build a foundation of influence and power. Using his knowledge of future technology, Reeve began to invent groundbreaking devices. He created efficient energy sources, advanced medical treatments, and innovative communication tools. At first, he shared his inventions with the world, hoping to ease suffering and improve the quality of life. World hunger, which had plagued many countries, began to dwindle as new agricultural methods, powered by Reeve's energy solutions, helped farms produce more food. Diseases that had once been death sentences were now curable with the advanced medicines he introduced. Countries with little power were able to defend themselves more effectively with Reeve's military innovations. The balance of power began to shift in favor of smaller nations, many of which had been oppressed for centuries. Governments hailed Reeve as a genius, a savior. People adored him, and his influence spread like wildfire. But as the years passed, Reeve began to feel the intoxicating effects of power. At first, he was driven by the desire to help, but soon, he found himself relishing the control his inventions granted him. The people praised him, but they didn't truly understand the depth of his knowledge. They were just pawns in his grand plan. Reeve's wealth grew exponentially, but so did his cynicism. He began to manipulate governments, not out of a desire to help, but to expand his own influence. The countries that once praised him now danced to his tune, bending to his every whim. And through it all, he continued to build his empire, growing richer, more powerful, and more ruthless with every passing year. Chapter 3, The Fall of a Hero. As Michael Reeve's power reached its peak, a young man named Alexander Martin found himself in a position where his skills were needed. Alexander, born into a poor family in the slums of Chicago, had always been determined to make something of himself. His parents worked tirelessly to support him, but there was never enough money for luxuries. From a young age, Alexander had a natural talent for mechanics, fixing broken machines in his neighborhood and making things work again. Through hard work and determination, Alexander earned a scholarship to a prestigious university. His intellect and drive impressed his professors, but it wasn't until he was hired as a junior assistant to a government contractor that his path crossed with Michael Reeve's. At first, Reeve took little interest in Alexander, seeing him as just another bright but insignificant mind. But Alexander's skills with engineering and technology caught Reeve's attention. It wasn't long before Reeve invited Alexander to work directly for him. Alexander, eager to make a difference in the world and having no idea of the darker side of his employer, accepted the offer. He was tasked with helping Reeve develop new technologies and oversee their implementation. At first, everything seemed fine. Alexander was proud to be part of something greater, to be working for a man who had done so much for the world. But as the months passed, Alexander began to see a different side of Michael Reeve. The man who had once seemed benevolent was now showing signs of arrogance, even cruelty. Reeve treated world leaders like puppets, pulling strings to force them to do his bidding. Alexander noticed how Reeve seemed more interested in gaining power than actually helping the people who had once idolized him. Chapter 4: The Hero's Backstory. Alexander Martin's rise to prominence was far from easy. Born to working-class parents in the rough neighborhoods of Chicago, he had witnessed the struggles of the poor firsthand. His father, a factory worker, and his mother, a seamstress, worked long hours to provide for their family, but the bills were never fully paid, and luxuries were out of reach. Alexander's early years were filled with hardship, but they also taught him the value of hard work and perseverance. When he was young, he developed a fascination with machines and technology. He spent his free time tinkering with broken radios and old cars, teaching himself how to fix them. His natural aptitude for mechanics and problem-solving was evident, but he had no way of pursuing his passion without financial support. He worked odd jobs throughout high school, doing everything from delivering newspapers to fixing household appliances, in order to save enough money for college. Against all odds, Alexander earned a scholarship to a local university, where he studied engineering and technology. It wasn't an easy road, and there were times when he almost gave up. But through sheer determination, he graduated at the top of his class. His talent for innovation did not go unnoticed, and soon he was offered a position with a major government contractor working on high-tech projects. Little did Alexander know that this job would eventually lead him to Michael Reeve and the world-changing technologies that would shape his destiny. Chapter 5: The Conflict Deepens. As Alexander spent more time working with Reeve, he began to question his employer's true intentions. The inventions that had once seemed like miracles were now being used as tools of control. Reeve's hold over the world's governments grew stronger by the day. What had started as a mission to help the world was now an empire built on manipulation and fear. One day, Alexander stumbled upon a set of documents that detailed a covert plan to overthrow several governments. Reeve's ultimate goal was to consolidate power in his own hands, creating a global dictatorship under his control. The world, which had once looked to him as a savior, was now nothing more than a chessboard to be manipulated. Unable to ignore the moral implications of his work, Alexander began to secretly divert some of Reeve's resources to help the people who were suffering under the system he had helped create. He used the advanced medical technologies to treat the sick in impoverished countries, provided food to starving populations, and helped rebuild war-torn areas. The people he helped began to whisper of a mysterious benefactor, a hero working behind the scenes to counteract Reeve's growing power. But Reeve soon took notice. He grew suspicious of Alexander's actions and began to watch him closely. It wasn't long before he discovered the truth. Chapter 6: The Betrayal. Reeve's response was swift and brutal. He dispatched his personal guards to capture Alexander, determined to silence the man who had once been his trusted assistant. The guards raided Alexander's home, but by then, he had already gone underground, disappearing into the shadows. Reeve's empire remained intact, but there was a crack in the foundation. The hero, though now in hiding, had made a difference. The people knew of his efforts, and whispers of rebellion began to spread. Reeve, however, continued his relentless quest for power, unconcerned by the whispers of revolt. He was too entrenched in his own arrogance, too drunk on his control to see the storm brewing on the horizon. As the story ends, we don't know if Alexander was captured. We only know that Reeve remains in power, waiting for the next hero to arise, someone who will challenge his reign and, perhaps, change the course of history once again.